Welcome to the HR on the Offensive podcast, brought to you by Lace Partners. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the latest HR on the Offensive podcast. It's me, Chris Howard from Lace Partners, joining you as always. And today we are talking about our campaign that we've recently launched, which is Becoming Skills Powered. And we have an expert in who we've had a couple of conversations with, and I've been quite keen to get on the pod because we are going to talk about all things skills-based organizations and actually how do organizations challenge themselves better when it comes to talking about being skills-based or skills-focused. I, of course, need a co-host in this, so I drag a lacer along, and the lacer that I've dragged this week is Gemma Ryle. Gems, how you doing?
Good, thanks. Happy to be here.
Yeah, really, really good. And yeah, this is going to be an interesting one. I'm keen to get into the nuts and bolts of this one. And to do that, we have Simon Gibson, who is the head of talent at Center Parcs. He's also been group head of learning development at M&S, advisory board member of the Learning and Performance Institute. You've also worked at Direct Line and RS Components. So Simon, say hello. And then also I'm going to ask you to do, before we get into our fundamentally different question and then start talking about skills-based organizations, a little hello to our listeners, and then a little bit on yourself and your background as well.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Gemma. Very excited to be here. Thanks for having me. Hopefully people aren't going to be bored of listening to me. I've got quite a weird and wonderful varied career, having never worked in the same sector twice. So I think there's a nice frame of reference for us to talk about different businesses, different business modalities and approaches. I'm fascinated by all things skills and capabilities, right? So that's great for me to be here and talking. Otherwise, it wouldn't be of any use to anyone. And throughout my career, I've been given a lot of feedback about being quite commercially focused and quite commercially attuned. So, hopefully I can bring some of that to the fore. And hopefully this is going to be of use to your audience to prompt some further debate, questions or insight, be it today or in the future.
Yeah, 100%. Of course, we're going to get into the detail of that. I'm going to get your views on this whole idea of skills-based organizations, because it feels like there's been a lot of market chatter, a lot of people talking about it. From me personally, what I read in the HR and business press in the last 12 months. So I'm keen to get your views on that. But before we do that, we need to do our check-in, our fundamentally different question. And I'm quite interested in this one because Simon told us a little something before we went live, which means that I'm quite interested to get his take on this. So fundamentally different question, Gems. I'm going to go first, and then I'm going to let you answer, and then we're going to find out what Simon's answer is. What I've been reading in the last couple of days is the Indiana Jones fedora from the Temple of Doom was just sold for £630,000. So my fundamentally different question is, what movie item or prop would you love to have? If somebody gave you a blank check and said, you can get anything you want, what would it be? I had a couple of options, but I'm going to go for the Back to the Future hoverboard that Michael J. Fox had, the kind of neon not purple, pink and green, which I just think would be really cool. I mean, if it could actually work and not just be a prop, that would be useful. But do you know what? I'd just take something that I can have sitting in my lounge, probably to cheese my wife off, because it totally wouldn't work with the colour scheme. But Gems, what prop or what item would you love to own from a movie?
I'm going to be a bit greedy. I would like the Mandalorian armor and the bike, like the hover bike that goes with it. So I'd like that whole piece.
Nice.
Yeah, that's mine.
That is pretty cool. Simon, can you outcall that Back to the Future hoverboard or the Mandalorian armor? And tell us your story.
Yeah, I've got loads of stories, right? So I don't know if it will help or not, but it's not fair, is it? So one of the companies I worked for was NBC Universal, or those listening might know it as Universal Pictures. So your reference to Back to the Future, I've had a meeting and stood on and spent a lot of time on the Clock Tower Square in Back to the Future, because that was part of our backlot. So that's my top trump one. We had Christmas
drinks. So cool. That is very
Christmas drinks one year in front of the Clock Tower. And in top trumps too, and funnily enough, you talking about props, quite early on, I went to, and this will link to maybe some of our bits about understanding the business. I went to the prop studio and met a complete guru of all things props. So if you think, if they're making a film for the 60s, right, they need lots of memorabilia and things from the 60s. If they're trying to make something futuristic, they need something futuristic. This place is massive, right? And you get this huge walk around. I'm a big fan of film and TV anyway. And he says, oh, look at this, right? And I was thinking, you've got to be kidding me. And it was if you remember Jurassic Park, the original Jurassic Park, where he's got the cane with the encased little bit of crystal.
Yeah,
this is the mosquito. And this is how we started, rebuilding dinosaurs. There's me holding the cane from the original Jurassic Park. Right. So, yeah, that's one of my very memorable stories about memorabilia. So it does connect, right? I love that little story there about the Indiana Jones bit. So, lots of funny stories about things that you can own and things that you can do. But I've been on the back clock, right? That's not really fair, is it, as well?
Yeah, that's sort of cheating, but yeah, he smashed us there. He smashed us there, Gems. I think we better talk about some skills-based organisation stuff because we're not winning that argument, are we?
No.
So, Simon, we wanted to get you on because as the listeners will have already heard in my intro, we've had a couple of conversations around this idea of skills-based organisations. You've talked a little bit about your own background, and let's start off, I guess, with a nice, easy, open-ended question around your kind of view on what a skills-based organisation means, because I feel like I'm reading a lot of stuff where it means different things to different people. So can I just get maybe a helicopter view to kick us off? And then maybe, Gems, you can ask the next question around so we start to delve into this a little bit more.
I don't think many companies are really clear about what they mean about being a skills-based organisation. And therein lies the challenge. Some of the challenge is, to your point, it's buzzwords, it's provider-led, it's technology-led, skills this, skills that. And you go, what does that mean? Are we hiring for skills? Are we developing certain skills? Do we know our critical skills? Are we working our way through that? And I suppose my opening gambit here is it's made the world quite a complicated place. And it's my belief is it wasn't meant to do that. It was actually meant to simplify and meant to help us become more equitable when we think about people, skills, capability, employment, development. I've got a bit of an economic 101, but that would be my kind of opening gambit. I don't know what you think, Gemma.
I think it's true. It's getting complicated. There's a lot of different noise out there. What does it mean? And it means different things to different people. Part of the reason is I think there's lots of different entry points into a skills-based organisation and lots of different business drivers. So it depends what problem you're trying to solve for. But down at the basics, I think that there's an opportunity to define what does it mean in a very basic, pragmatic form. And I guess, Simon, it'd be interesting to hear what your view is of how would you distill that down into the basic form to say what is a skills-based organisation and what benefit does it have? And noticed you talked earlier a bit about your commerciality. Where does the commercial angle come into that as well?
Using my experience and us having this kind of open forum to discuss it, I think quite simplistically, you've got to understand. Sounds really simple, right? You've got to understand what is your business trying to do and where is it going. Some people might call that the business strategy, right? You go, that's okay. So challenge number one, but an actionable point is, do you understand your business strategy? Where are you today and where are you going? Once you understand that, I think that can translate quite quickly into, in inverted commas, if you could see us, right? A skills-based organisation or a skills-based approach around, well, what are the gaps are you trying to close? And to your point, Gemma, that then opens up some of those doors that are at varying points on your employee life cycle. Are you going to build those skills? Are you going to buy those skills? Are you going to borrow those skills? Have you got enough time to build those skills? Do you know how to build those skills? Do you know how many, how much? Do you know how much that's going to cost? And that comes into the commerciality bit of, is it reasonable for an organisation to go, we're going to upskill everybody in the next 2 minutes? Well, no, that's not going to happen, is it? That's not realistic. So how relatable, how real is it to your company is going to depend on a number of factors. So I'm going to come all the way back to what I said at the start. Just be really clear on where is the business going? What's it trying to do? And then you can overlay that with, here's how I think we can close some of those gaps. And you will always have gaps.
It's really interesting because you also posed a number of questions, almost sub-questions. You've got the overlying bits, where is the business going? What do you want to do? But then there's, who do we get involved with this? How long is it going to take? There's a whole load of questions in there. So I guess for people listening in to this podcast, like when we did the prep for this podcast, we were talking about the different types of people involved, whether that's people within your organization, whether that's suppliers that you talk about. Because when you talk about, we've had previous conversations about where do businesses even start when they're coding up their skills, for example? Is it just they buy tech that can help, that's AI infused, that can help them to start to draw out the skills within their business? Just as a starting point, Can you talk us through your thoughts around where businesses start and the stakeholders that are involved, whether it's suppliers, whether it's practitioners, like individuals? I know we had a very, very interesting conversation on that previously. So perhaps if you can just elaborate for our listeners, Simon.
I'm not getting paid to endorse anyone, right? And neither are you guys. You're offering, well, it's not free, but you're offering a service that says, we can help you evolve your people strategy, your talent strategy, your development strategy, whatever that's called, right? I suppose what I'm trying to say is there are some technological solutions out there that will help you codify skills and capability. Great. I'm not sure you need those. And I think at the start, some of those suppliers might beat me up. And I know some of them really, really well and followed some of them for a very long time. I think you've got to have a series of conversations. You've got to go about this in a really curious and inquisitive manner that says, I fully understand how my company does X. And by X, I mean, does it make something? Does it sell something? Does it build something? Does it create something? And I've done enough homework. And I know that 1, 2, and 7 are the real pain points on that journey. And I know that 1, 2, and 7 are roughly made up of these 5 or 6 core skills, right? I'm really playing this out really quickly. It doesn't happen as quickly as we know, right? And therefore, you can kind of mark your own homework. And this is the bit about you're asking about stakeholders and who's involved. And Gemma's point on kind of the touch points is, are you actually developing those critical skills, capabilities? Are you doing those things that are transforming where your organization's going? Transforming is my word, evolving, revolutionizing. This is my point about your maturity or the sector that you're in, right? Are you going to really radically change what you're doing? Or are you just playing around the edges? Or even worse, right? Are you just keeping a conspiracy going that says we do some nice stuff and we do some training and someone comes in, does a bit of jazz and a taz, trainatainment is what I talk about. Woo, everybody feels great. The end. I'm going, well, hold on, nothing's changed there, right? You can't mark your own homework. So again, to answer your question, Chris, I think you've got to be talking to suppliers about the solutions to maybe some problems that you've got. I think you've got to be really clear on the problems that you've got. And if you need some help on those problems, there's people like you that they can talk to. There's other companies, right? Are they talking to the business leaders, the unit leaders, and understanding what is the real pain point? And then we should be coming back together to go, I think we can do something. We can develop that. We can buy that. We can borrow that. Oh, that's going to take 2 years, right? Have we got 2 years? Can we wait 2 years for that? It's going to keep evolving and it'll be quite organic to build out from that. Again, I'll make it sound really simple, but it's not.
No, I totally agree, Simon. And in terms of that, there's times at that point where they might say skills-based is not a suitable option for them. And I guess it'd be interesting to hear from you, is it relevant for everybody? Is it relevant for all industries? Are there particular companies, businesses that skills-based might be suitable for, in your view?
Yes, and right. And I'm not trying to duck the question, but I suppose this is where I'm always intrigued to what your audience might say afterwards. And I'd quite happily talk to anybody afterwards, as I always would do, right? And connect and carry on a conversation. How can it be that we recruit people into a company, big, small, ginormous, and we know loads about them before they come through the door? They come through the door and it's gone, disappeared. I have no idea on Gemma's skills, capabilities once she's got the job. I've given her a job. I said, I didn't say that. I said, what's the job made up of? The job's made up of tasks. Okay, to do those tasks, what do you need? Skills or capabilities. This is my definition 101, right? I'm not stealing or ripping anything off. I'm just saying, hold on, but I didn't know that Gemma was really good at maths. I found out that we need a load of data capability. If I could point Gemma at some of those data building capabilities, actually I could get more out of Gemma. Gemma would do more of the stuff she enjoys. Therefore, Gemma is much more engaged and driving our business forward. And also, as an individual, you've got the potential to earn more money, contribute to your local economy, keep yourself employed. How macro do you want to go? Less people on benefits, more people in work, right? You can keep going up and up and up and up and up. To answer your question, what do? We put out job adverts. What's all the technology doing? AI is reading job adverts going, you need these skills and capabilities. I reckon I could do a piece of research that says, but that job advert, right, job description hasn't been looked at for X years. Yet all the data, Chris, you started with, all the data, all the research, everything else is going, oh my God, we are moving absolute quantum light speed. Isn't everything doomed? I'm like, but job descriptions don't seem to be working like that. That's a bit weird. Do you see what I mean? There's another paradigm in the system.
Yep, it's really interesting. And just building on that, I just want to get your thoughts on, and you sort of talked about it earlier, this idea that this is a constantly evolving piece, isn't it? Because, and we've had this conversation before. I know I did it when we did the intro pod around the skills that I learned when I joined versus the skills that I have now. What should businesses that are thinking about being a bit more skills led and being a little bit more sophisticated in trying to code or tap into that, how do organizations get through to that untapped pool of talent that they have internally, do you think? It's not just a piece of tech, right? It's not just a piece of AI tech.
No, this is my bit about, again, it's a macro view, which will depend on your company, probably your owner, your CEO, your MD, probably your people function. What is the weight? I was talking yesterday to somebody, right? If I could write the equation, I would actually write the equation. I reckon I'd do quite well out of making a lot of money, right? But in that equation, one of the factors is going to be the weight of status quo. What is the weight of status quo? What is the weight, the power, the kudos given to keeping the lights on? And in turn, I think that's going to drive your question, Chris, which is, but hold on, surely you want to tap into if Gemma was really good at maths, right? And Chris has done a little bit of coding, and you need people that can do data, and you need people to write a certain programming language. But if you knew that about Chris and Gemma, commercially, you can go, oh my God, it's at least 40 to 50, 60% cheaper. This research exists, right? It's more efficient to invest in Chris and Gemma than it is to go out to the market. But the weight of the status quo in the market is what? Job advert, job platform, applicant tracking system, lose all details, put someone in a human capital management system, have their name, address, where they live and how much you pay them. Now, hold on, I've just lost a load of information. So to answer your question, how do you go get that back? Well, guess what? You've got to go and have quite an open dialogue with your organization, with your team, now you can start really small. You could start in a team, you could start in a division, you could start in an area. And this is my bit around understanding pain points or the clear critical skills and capabilities. We value these 5 things. You go, great, I'm going to go talk to the team in region A. How do we feel about those 5 things? Of the 5, and I did this in Direct Line Group, we did a really manual exercise, first off about data capability. We had a 5-point scale. We had 5 or 6 things. They weren't great. I'm not breaking any confidences, right? They've done some amazing work since, and we started some brilliant work when we were there. That was all based off the back of, we think it's these 5 things. Let's go work it out.
Touching on a point we talked about earlier, that's all very business driven. What about from an employee self-serve perspective around taking a look at LinkedIn? LinkedIn, you're able to select the skills that you've got. That has then a massive database that a lot of organizations don't have. So LinkedIn might know more about your people than you do. How do we switch up a bit to make it more an employee-led element where they take ownership of the skills that they have? And you're saying you wanted to have data analytics there. Well, what if you have skills within your organization you didn't know you needed, or are a sort of a secondary, third overlay onto that? So 2 parts of that: employee self-led skills capturing, and then the unknown skills that you might not necessarily need, as a business.
This goes back to my point we've discussed before outside of this pod. It's the partnership, right? In some instances, you're going to have to go out and find access to information and data that isn't on your human capital management system. There's a reason why people put that on LinkedIn. And again, we're not getting endorsed by LinkedIn. There's 1 billion people on that platform. That's Sync. There's 1 billion people on that platform that have a varying degree. You can discredit it all you like. They have these skills, this capability. Here's their job history. Here's their career history. Here's things they're looking at. You're right. LinkedIn could tell me more about the staff in M&S than I could tell you about my human capital management system with the data in M&S. So there's something about reaching out, understanding. That's where some of these platforms and some of that intelligence says on a macro view, you can get much more insight, like talent intelligence is where I would kind of let that play. And then to flip it the other way, to your point, employee-led, this is where I'm saying you have to be overt about the deal. This is where we are today. This is what you do today. I always make something anonymous, right? I stack widgets. You go, great. Tomorrow, we're no longer going to stack widgets. Tomorrow can be 12, 18 months in the future. You go, but what we do need, or we do value, is this. I don't know if you've got this. You can't even see my hands, right? It's what people are saying. But I don't even know if you've got this, B, to do that. And so therefore, there's got to be something this is where we've got to be really overt. And you go back to like my macro view, right? The world is quite a complicated place, politically supercharged, right? Economically, it's not fun times in the United Kingdom. Socially, it is incredibly difficult, right? The cost of living, what we're going through. Yet interestingly, technologically, we're going, isn't this going to change the world and how we work? AI is what I'm, pointing at. So there's something about people kind of waking up, smelling the coffee, understanding, look, we've known this for a long time, 15, 16, 17, 18 years. We need to increase our skills and capability on a more regular basis. You doing what you've always done forever is not sustainable. That's a macro view.
I like that. I was just thinking as you were trying to talk about the types of businesses that would be successful at almost delivering utopia. How much does culture of an organization play into it? Because if you've got an organization that has culturally a lot of people, or their desire is to be constantly learning and constantly evolving, often people assume that tech companies are an example of that. How much does culture play into businesses being successful at trying to drive this skills-based approach, do you think?
If I was writing up my equation on a whiteboard, which I've got in my office, right, but status quo, the climate, the culture, the environment has a huge impact on a company's ability, a business's ability, whatever size, to learn, adapt, evolve, and grow. My slight challenge to the tech view as well is that's also to do with timing, right? It's a lot easier I worked in Fujitsu again, right? Massive Japanese technological led house. We did a massive piece of work around cloud technologies. I don't think they would have said they were a learning organization. They would have just said they're adaptive, agile, innovative. They used to do servers in the basement. Nobody wants physical servers in the basement. There's this thing called cloud technology that's taken off. They tried to make their own. It didn't quite work. So then they needed lots of people who could work on AWS, Amazon Web Services, and Microsoft Azure. Great. Hoovered it up. Massive piece of work. It's a case study. Amazing, right? Or to your point, Chris, you get companies, and we are littered with them in this country and others, right, that go, no, we'll be all right. Oh, we've gone bust. I mean, literally weekly, right? Weekly. So the weight of culture, climate, history, status quo, maybe somebody smarter than me, right, can articulate that in a slightly different way. But I think that really does carry something.
Taking it a slightly different angle, when we talked last time, Simon, you talked about wanting to have sort of a realization moment for the people HR profession, thinking about some of the challenges that are coming up. Do you want to expand on that a bit?
A really strong challenge from me, right, again, to our audience, to anyone listening, is you can't say, like, we're all in for our people, we really invest in our people. Like, words and pictures don't match, right? You can't say we really care about our people and we're going to go and make 5,000 people redundant because they haven't got the skills and capabilities we need. And, it's a bit like your point, Chris, before, trying to link those together. How well vested are we? I think we're in the middle of a perfect storm, right? It's a perfect time to be in our function, to be in this profession of people, skills, capability, learning. It's how you keep someone employable. You're going to have to work longer, especially in our country, right? You're going to have to probably work a bit harder, people, by the way. That's a bit different and difficult for us to hear. And you're probably going to have to learn something, right? Multi-skilled careers are going to become more of the norm. And I think we've got to really challenge ourselves in this profession, in this industry around, have we been doing a lot of things that keep status quo? Have we been doing a load of stuff that keeps the lights on? And if we really challenge ourselves, lots of data, again, you can look at it. We spend billions a year on skills and capability, yet all the research is saying we flatline. It actually is getting worse. It's getting worse. What? We'll stop spending it then. Don't do it. Focus on the skills and capabilities we do need. Make some really difficult choices. I'm not saying you're going to be able to plug every gap. I've never said that. And that's your point, Gemma, earlier on around you might be lucky and uncover some hidden diamonds, right? Some hidden gems that you can find and polish. Yeah, I'm all for that. Caveat, it takes time, it takes hard work, it takes energy, and it takes a load of commitment to say we're not going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but we are going to do 7, 8, 9.
We've got just a couple of minutes left, James. If there's any final questions you can ask, but I've got one that I wanted to particularly pose to you, Simon, which is if we're doing this podcast, if we decide to get back together in 2-3 years' time, where do you think we are at as a profession when we're talking about that, rather than obviously opening up this podcast, I started by saying you're hearing a lot of noises about skills-based organization. Let's start to evolve into this approach as opposed to traditional models. 2, 3, 4, 5, you can pick a number if you want years' time. What's your kind of, where do you think we will be at? But also, what would be utopia in your eyes, as in businesses are getting this and they're doing it right?
My experience tells me if I could see that far into the future, I'd be a very rich man. Right back to our Back to the Future point, right? I'm standing in front of the clock tower. I think it's difficult to go beyond like a 24-month, 2 and a bit, maybe 3 years stretch to get an understanding or take a punt on where your business is going, what it might be doing, how it might work. I would like us to be in a position as a profession, I suppose, where we're much more at the forefront of driving those right conversations on business pain points, adding real value, delivering real outcomes, rather than being famous for some train-attainment and standing at the front of the classroom and everybody feeling really happy. I'm massively generalising, right? And I'm prod and poking our function. A super nirvana state would be that there are case studies afoot of organisations smashing it out the park who are truly skills-led and demonstrating what it means to upskill, reskill, and keep people employable. I'm just a little bit sceptical to some of those at the moment.
And if you could dispel one myth about skills-based organisations and skills-based approaches, what would that be?
I suppose my myth is it's probably going to land me in hot water. Tech's not going to answer that problem for you. It's got to be augmented. And, the myth there is here's a solution to a problem that you haven't got. It's really hard. Like I said, I've worked in a lot of different industries, a lot of different economic climates. Yes, they've got similar challenges. They're always different, though. Maturity's different, status quo's different, culture's different, the leader's different, the budget's different, the resource is different, the time is different. I would really dispel that myth of tech will help, it won't solve. And you've got to do a lot of homework before you go and find a thing, whatever that thing is, that may or may not best help you. But don't dispel it, because there is some value. So there's a little bit of a paradigm in my answer as well.
Yeah, but that goes back to what we were talking about towards the beginning, where we were talking about the different stakeholders and stuff. Like, tech isn't the answer, but it is one piece of the puzzle, so to speak. And I think that's a really good way of just bookending today's podcast. Simon, absolutely amazing to get your views on all things skills-based organisations. Thank you very much for joining Gems and I.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. And like I said, happy to help and hopefully keep a bit of a conversation alive.
Where can people find you on the old socials? Just LinkedIn, where all of your skills are coded up, I'd imagine. So.
Yeah, I'm completely out of date. You can find me on LinkedIn. I won't be a quiet voice on there. So I look forward to receiving some communication or further questions from those that listen.
Yeah, so if you've got any further questions, please feel free to drop Simon a connection and have a chat with him. Gems, thank you very much for co-hosting with me today.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be here. Thanks, excellent. Simon. Some thought-provoking points as well.
Yeah,
and I
really
want to hear more about your equation in the future too.
Yeah, I'm working on it. Maybe I'll write a book. That's what people do. I shouldn't put that in a podcast. Maybe someone will come back.
Someone will hold you to it. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please feel free to give us a like, a follow, all of that sort of good stuff. You can follow us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find out all about our back catalogue on the Lace Partners website, which is www.lacepartners.co.uk/podcast. But from myself, from Simon, and from Gemma for now, thank you very much for listening. And hopefully we'll catch you next time on the HR on the Offensive podcast. Bye-bye.